Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. Hope everyone's having a great day. I am super pleased and excited to share with you the upcoming session we have before us. Before we jump into it, just wanted to share a few reminders. You will receive your proof of participation directly from Zoom within 24 hours. And please do stay on the Zoom meeting, the Zoom webinar upon its conclusion so that you can complete the evaluation. I am so pleased and honored to present Kelly Blair Hart this afternoon. She is a GED instructor from Prince George's Community College, also sharing that she is also on the GED Testing Service Board of Directors. So very, very pleased and honored to spend this time with you, Kelly. Let me just launch a quick poll and then I'll turn it over to her. We just want to see who's in the audience. So let me go ahead and put that out there. So what is your role in adult education? If you could just let us know. Looks like we're approaching 100% completion. Thank you for completing that. I'm going to end it and share the results. Largely instructors, but also instructional specialists and intake assessment specialists. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Had this really huge smile on my face. Hey Jesse, hey Grayla, nice to see you guys. Only because I think I might be the only person on the planet that gets this excited about math. So hopefully some of you guys in there know that feeling, and just for you being here and for myself to have the opportunity to be with you, I'm very grateful for that. So what we're doing today, test taking strategies for GED math, and I'm going to get to do some practical strategies to help boost those student scores. This is particularly for the GED test, and we're going to go ahead and get started with that. Let me see if I can move on to my next slide here. There we go. Oh yes, first I must do the disclaimer. And I'm going to read this out loud, so I'm going to go ahead and do this disclaimer. If you're not new to these workshops, then you know what this is all about. I'm going to read it on behalf. Let's see. The content or opinions expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect or present the views, positions, or policies of the Maryland Department of Labor, nor does the mention of trade names, commercial products, or organizations imply an official endorsement by the Maryland Department of Labor. Just wanted to be sure that I've got that in there. And let's see, we have here, thank you again for the introduction. Just slightly again, my name is Kelly Blair Hart. I am with the GED Testing Service Board of Directors, and I'm also a math instructor for the Prince George's Community College program. I also have my own heart-to-heart tutoring service for adult learners. I have 20 years of teaching experience with middle school and high school adult education, and I also have dyscalculia. I thought that was very important to put in there because lots of people are amazed that a person such as myself who has dyscalculia actually went on to be a math instructor. I also have 100% pass rate for all my students who take the math test, and I am a GED graduate myself. I wanted to make sure we understand again that why we are here with the GED testing service. We know the stumbling blocks that students are facing. So I want to share some stats with you about what types of problems students are struggling with the most. And they have mostly to deal with the algorithmic understanding of concepts. And I'll show you some examples from the calculator and non-calculator part. These skill gaps, what we're going to do is take a look at them and actually practice some of the problems ourselves. And we're going to practice in as much as we possibly can within the hour. Usually when I do this presentation, it's about a 3-hour presentation, so we get really knee deep into the math, but we're going to utilize the time that we have, and we're going to try to get some of that practice in here. And so it was noted, if you signed up for this workshop, that it would help if you have the TI-30xs Multiview calculator. And that's okay, Laura, I see you. And so if you have that on you, that will greatly help benefits with doing some of these problems. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on using that calculator you can show your students in order to get more of the math problems correct. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And so again, just making sure you understand our agenda. Now, the agenda, we're going to first identify the concepts students typically struggle with when taking the GED math test. We're going to apply practical strategies to help students master those algorithmic process of those concepts quickly and effectively, because it is a time test. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit more about using that TI-30xs Multiview calculator. As you may know, that this is the only calculator that is allowed to be used during the GED test, either handheld or by using one that's on the screen. These are some of the problems I'm hoping that we get to practice today. And these are some of the skills gaps that we're seeing across the country. Multiplying polynomials, quadratic equations, factoring polynomials, graphing linear equations in slope-intercept form, graphing linear equations and that are not in slope-intercept form, and equations of a line passing 2 points. There are some other ones, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to get some practice of a couple of these each for today. And let me talk about that calculator for a second. Hold on, I talk very fast. I'm sorry. I get very excited about the math. And so if I need to slow down, somebody please just tell me and I'll do that. So the calculator, you have your handheld calculator. Here's TI-30xs and what it looks like. The one that I'll be using is on screen. So mine will look like this when I pop it up. And also, did you know that there's an app for that? And so either through your phone, if you type in scientific calculator 3034, you should find one that pops up like this. Might cost you a few bucks, but it's a great little app for traveling with a calculator. If you're anything like me, every time I get a free moment, I like to do math. Like waiting for a doctor's appointment, I'll probably pop up some math questions and use a calculator app that's on my phone. And then when you download the app on your phone, you should get an icon that pops up that looks like this for the TI-30xs one or the 34 one. We're going to strictly stick with the 30xs. Here's some information about the test. Here we go. So about the test. GED students pass 3 or 4 subjects, and here's a data summary from GED Testing Service. Over the past 2 years, GED Testing Service has tracked 77,000 test takers who have passed the test for 3 of the 4 subjects. And guess what that one last subject is? You see it right there, 82%. Math is the last one to pass. 11% for RLA, 5% social studies, and 2% for the science. Just in case, if you're unaware, a little bit about the test, and this comes straight from the GED.com website. If you look under about the test topics are basic math, geometry, basic algebra, graph and functions. Time is 115 minutes, including a small bit of a break. There are 2 parts to it, the non-calculator part and the calculator part. There are 5 questions that are non-calculator, and the rest you can use the TI-30xs calculator in order to complete the problems. And of course, for the state, prices vary. For Maryland, actually, I'm not sure. What is the price for Maryland? Do we know? Anybody can answer that. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you. $14.25 after the discount code. Oh, yes, that discount code. And I see another price of $36. Jesse, right, with the code. Thank you, Jesse. 14.25. All right. Good. I'm glad we know. Let's see what else. Here's some more stats for you. GED test performance level descriptors. We have 4 levels for the test. Level 1 is when students score below passing, which is anywhere between 100 and 144. Level 2, that's the pass high school equivalency rate of 145 to 165. We have level 3, which is college ready. So that's a score of 165 to 174. And then level 4, college ready plus credit, depending on the college that a student may enroll, they could possibly receive credit. There it is. Thank you, Jesse. Jesse put in chat the code, if anyone is not aware of the code for Maryland, to get a discount. We're going to talk a little bit more about level 1 because that's where the importance is right here, the below passing level. here's some interesting things about the level 1 test takers. Now, here's the thing that I find most interesting about the language, and this is coming straight from the GED Testing Service website under the educators and administrators portion of the site. When students see these levels, these concepts, excuse me, they're usually performing inconsistent with these levels, or they have a limited but developing proficiency in demonstrating these skills. And so these are the skills that they struggle with. Again, the quantitative problem solving with rational numbers, quantitative problem solving and measurements, algebraic problem solving with expressions and equations, and the most dreaded one that I've seen, algebraic problem solving with graphs and functions. This is one that I think students struggle with the most. And a lot of times it's because when they take these, they lack of exposure to it, especially when it comes to the graphing and doing slope intercept form type of questions, which we'll be able to take a look at today. So with the arithmetic computation, this is part of the non-calculator section of the test. These are some of the things that we see that have a little bit of a skills gaps. And we're talking about the 4 basic operations, you know, the adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing without a calculator, particularly when it comes to, decimals, integers, the order of operations, squares and cube roots, and undefined expressions, especially with the undefined expressions. And so we're not taking a look at much of the non-calculator section today as we go into doing some actual math problems. We're going to focus on tips and tricks with the calculator, especially when it comes to the polynomials. But I wanted to put this up here so that you know what parts of the non-calculator part of the test that we see a little bit of struggle with students. And also with number sense, basic operations, like ordering fraction, decimal, percents. That would be part of the first 5 questions that you would see. We see a lot of students struggling with that, with factors and multiples, understanding how exponents works, and distance on a number line. I'm talking absolute value. And so we see a lot of struggle with that one as well. Make sure we're all good. Okay. Okay, so here's some examples of non-calculator problems. I wanted to put this up there, and I'm gonna leave it up here for a second so you can take a look at it. These are not the problems we're working out, but I wanted you to be able to see what I'm talking about from the previous page of the type of things that we're describing. You can see the first one, placing fractions in order, least common multiple, multiplying fractions, decimals, and percents, order of operations, exponents, and square and cube roots. These are typical type of problems that you would see in the first 5 problems without a calculator. And so I apologize because I'm going a little bit fast. Again, I'm used to this presentation being 3 hours long, but I'm pretty sure nobody wants to stay with me for 3 hours doing math. I won't take it personally. Except maybe Jessie, she might want to stay with me. And so with this presentation, it'll be available to you so you can have these examples as well. And please, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in chat. I like to answer questions as we go. Here's some other type of non-calculator problems that are, oh, there you go. Thank you, Jessie. Other type of problems, especially when it comes to undefined expressions. And the thing, and we're not going to practice these, but I just wanted to share with you with undefined expressions. If perhaps anyone teaches this in their class, an undefined expression is basically a fraction with a 0 at the bottom. And so what we would see on the test, and this came from the actual practice test, GED practice test, is they would get questions like these, and they would have to know that undefined means that the denominator has to equal 0. And you would get multiple choice selection of which numbers could we substitute for X in order to make the outcome 0. And a lot of times students don't understand that simply because they don't know the definition of undefined. An example of absolute value and operations with absolute value. And this one right here, the one that has the temperature right here, we see this very common for students that are missing is questions such that has to do with absolute value or distance on a number line. The temperature drops from 24 degrees Fahrenheit to -3 degrees Fahrenheit. Find the change in temperature. And a lot of times what our students will do is actually subtract those numbers instead of applying absolute value. Same thing with the question down below. I snagged that straight from a GED practice test. Points on a number line, going from one point to another. Now, again, I'm sorry that we're not actually going to practice any of these non-calculator skills, but at the end of the presentation, I have a contact list and teach. There you go. Thank you, John. I see you. And where you can actually see YouTube videos that I do on all of these types of problems. Calculator part. Hey, MJ, thank you. Hey, good to see you. Calculator part. So a lot of times students are struggling with the surface area volume of three-dimensional shapes, such as these. And what comes along with this is that a lot of times our students don't realize that a lot of the formulas they need are going to be right on the formula sheet when it comes to the three-dimensional shapes, but we have a lack of practice of applying those. So this is a skills gap that we see most frequently with students as well. Also, when it comes to the three-dimensional shapes, there are questions in which you have to find a missing dimension instead of the surface area or the volume. Such as, let me find them here, in which the surface area volume is given, you have to find other dimensions such as the radius or the height. Probability. Simple probability, not too bad, but when it comes to other probabilities such as sequential replacement or without replacement probability type questions, let me show you a few examples of those. Indeed it is, John. Answers in geometry are often given with pi symbols. And students would have to realize that the pi symbol is multiplying the answer they got with the pi. Indeed. Example problems of probability here. A second for you to take a look at those. Replacement versus a non-replacement problem. A few seconds to take a look at those. And these are all, again, example problems that we see that we have skills gaps with students across the country. Inequalities, something else that we see students struggling with, especially understanding the difference between equations and inequalities and knowing what inequalities means. I know I see that with my own students and I have to tell them that equations mean X equals this and only that, nothing but that. But inequalities is a way of representing more than one answer of what X could be. So it's all about knowing the vocabulary, especially when seeing them with word problems, the less than, the more than, greater than, or words such as at minimum or at least or at most. And then when it comes to the algorithmic practice, we see a struggle with when to switch the direction of the inequality symbol. You know what I'm talking about, right? More examples of inequality type of problems of first knowing how to solve and then knowing how to graph it on a number line, or when the answers are given in multiple choice number lines, particularly ones that have distributive property. Like this one, you'd be switching to inequalities one. And again, my apologies for going kind of fast with these skills gaps, but the presentation will be there for you so you can see the type of different questions. And we'll be doing our math practice with mostly polynomial work. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Virginia. It says that they need to and sometimes have difficulty connecting these with equations. Yes. And again, representing that difference between one answer as opposed to many possible answer choices. Word problems when it comes to inequalities. So in the GED test, we have a typical questions of inequality word problems, especially dealing with money. And Sarah can only buy a certain amount of jerseys, and then so a student will lots of times pick an inequality answer that represents way over the budget. Whitney has a question: are compound inequalities on the test? I will tell you, Whitney, thus far, I have not seen a compound inequality question. You're welcome. Let's see what we have next. Some of the stuff we're going to get into with our practice today when it comes to algebraic computation. Most of the test is algebraic computation. Thank you, John. And some of these we'll be taking a look at today too, as well, when it comes to especially multiplying the polynomials and the factoring using a quadratic equation, linear expressions. My particular favorite, polynomials and what to do with that quadratic equation formula and factoring. And again, I'm going through some tips on how to use the calculator to speed up the process. And when it comes to the polynomials with the adding and subtracting, it's particularly the ones with subtraction because you're going to end up with some negative numbers and students really need to understand how to apply their integer rules. And I will be sharing, of course, my the YouTube channel and information, which you can contact me. You can see videos of all these things that I'm running through. Slope and graphing linear equations. Understanding slope-intercept form and how to graph that onto a chart, the graph, and then with the GED test, most likely if you're trying to take a look at the graphs in your multiple choice, what happens is that you'll be given an equation. You have to make sure it's in slope-intercept form and choose the right graph, A, B, C, or D, that matches the equation. Students also struggle with parallel and perpendicular lines. And trying to distinguish if lines in a slope-intercept form are parallel or perpendicular to each other. Graphing linear equations and also being able to identify functions. Questions that look like these. I see you, John. Yeah. We see lots of difficulty when it comes to, again, placing equations in slope-intercept form correctly. These are incorrect. That one is correct. And then being able to graph such as this. You have an equation, you place it in a slope-intercept form, and then being able to graph. Oh, thanks. I wasn't sure. TABE, so TABE does a point slope form. Yep. Now we're going to go straight into practice. I hope everybody is ready for this. But let me stop for a second to see if there's any quick questions that I can answer. Again, that first half was very fast. You'll be able to get copies of that. But what I wanted to do is make sure that we're able to see some of the things that you're able to help your students gain points on quickly. And I do see a lot of a difference with TABE and CASA's problems as opposed to GED level problems. Everybody good? I'm gonna take that as a yes. Thank you, Terry. Okay, so here we go. We're going to go ahead and get started. Now, this, starting with the polynomials, multiplying polynomials, how many of us are very familiar with FOIL? Yeah, that's very good, Whitney. Thank you. Thank you, Virginia. I see you. All right, here we go. FOIL it is. So a quick reminder of how to do FOIL because it is the part of the master plan of doing all this polynomial work. So we're going to take our first one and let me see how many people in chat can actually tell us what FOIL represents. It's like the acronym. There you go. I see Cassidy, first, outer, inner, and last. There it is. So first, and then we're going to do outer, and then inner, and then last. Okay, so here is also too what comes in this presentation that you'll be able to receive later is a whole packet of problems and with the answers attached to them. I'm going to try to hit a couple of problems from each section that I talked about. So the problem that we see with students a lot is when they're doing the multiplying the polynomials is understanding this acronym and which numbers to multiply with each other. So I use the FOIL and I tend to color code when I'm teaching with my students. The F stands for first, and that represents the first number of each set of parentheses. So I have here and here. So I have x times 6x, 6x, and that's going to give us what? I'm hoping we're all representing that that's going to give you 6x squared. And then sometimes my students are always asking, they're like, how do you know that it's x squared? And I tell them this, I said, you multiply your coefficient. I'll say, yeah, you multiply your coefficient. So that's 6. How many times did you connect x? And you connect it twice. So 6x squared this way. Outer is going to represent, see if we can get outer in here with my blue. There we go. So our outer numbers are going to be which two numbers? Thank you. I see Caleb. He says x and a -2. Outer represents the first number in the first set and the last number in the second set, which we see as a -2. So I have x times -2, and that's going to give me -2x. And then we're going to go to inner. Inner represents the numbers that are on the inside the most. And so that's going to give me a -3 times a positive 6x. Move this out of the way. That should give me -18x. And last represents the last numbers of each set. So my last number in the first set is a -3 times a -2. That's going to give us a positive 6. One last step, then that's the part that we see students missing the most, and that's the combining the like terms. When you have the GED test, they will give you this, an incomplete answer, as one of the answer choices. And it'll also give you the answer in which you have to combine your like terms, and that would be the most complete. Combining the like terms, which the like term I see is this one and this one. I combine them, which means I'm adding together, knowing that you have to know your integer rules. I have -2 combined with a -18. That's going to give me a -20. -20x. I'm going to bring down my +6 and my 6x squared, giving me my final answer. Any questions about the multiplying the polynomial for this first example right here? Let's try another. Multiplying the polynomial. And also too, I like to make sure my students recognize this format. And eventually they're going to recognize this as a quadratic formula, a quadratic equation formula, in order to process and putting all types of polynomials together. So F stands for first, again, first number of each set. I have 3m times 8m. That is going to give me 24m squared. 24m squared. Outer, that stands for the first number in the first set and the last number in the second set. That's 3m times 7. That's going to give me a positive 21. How many times did I see m? Just once. Inner, that stands for the second number in the first set and a first number in the second set. That's -1 times 8m. That's going to give me -8m. Last stands for the last number in the first set, -1 multiplied with a positive 7. -1 times a positive 7 is going to give me -7. And then let's not forget, our final part is to combine our like terms. The like terms I have, and usually they're right there in the middle. I have a 21m combined with a -8m. Knowing integer rules, that's going to give me a positive 13m. The -7 doesn't combine with anything, and neither does the 24m squared, so I bring those right back down. Positive 13. There you go. Thank you, John. You got that in there before I did. Typically, when I'm teaching with the polynomials, when it comes to FOIL, because lots of students will recognize or remember FOIL, but again, I like them to concentrate on this format, because this format is the standard point form. I hope many people have brought their calculator, yeah? Thank you, Terry. So we tend to see, and that's just a couple of the problems I did with the polynomials, and you see your point form right here. For example, the answer that we just had, showing the relationship between the two. And I always tell my students, you have your m squared number, your m number, and then your last number, and that matches the point form. X squared or m, x number, and your last number. Because understanding this, they can recognize when it comes to quadratic equations. Ooh, I like that, Whitney. Thanks. So when it comes to quadratic equations, we have students that miss this a lot. And to me, I like to think that it's because students don't realize how effectively they can use their calculator in order to solve quadratic equations in seconds. So that's where we're going to go practice now. Notice the format, same. X squared, X, number. How to recognize, this is another thing too, is how to recognize when you have a quadratic equation rather than a regular equation. Like let's say a typical two-step equation. How do you know the difference between the two? Yeah, the practice test has a couple really hard ones in there, John. I agree. This, what I wrote here in green, is a typical two-step equation. Look familiar? You would subtract the 6 first and then, divide out with the 5. And so sometimes when students see a question like this on their test, they're thinking it's a typical two-step equation, and it's not. So I try to get them to recognize whether they're looking at a quadratic equation or regular typical two-step equation. And my key is this: is there an x squared number? Is there a squared number in your problem? If there is, you are looking at a quadratic equation, especially if you have one that equals 0. Now, all the time they won't equal 0. That's down here, and we'll practice one of those in a minute. But the main part is to help students save some time by understanding whether they're looking at quadratic or regular two-step equation, which they probably have plenty of practice with. Look for the x squared number, or variable squared. And here we go. Those with the calculator, here's the fun part right here. When you have your quadratic equation, we are going to do it like this. Here we go. Let me make this bigger. And once you have the calculator practice, you'll be able to put that in real quick. This is my A number. See right here, A, x squared. That's my A number. Remember, in algebra, 1s are invisible. So my A number is a 1. And then you have your B number. My B number here is a 5. And then my C number. My C number is a 6. You have the formula sheet. This is the part where students will be directed to their formula sheet. And now that I can identify, and it's always going to be in order, A, B, and C, I can plug in to my formula here. So the first half of my formula says negative B. My B is a positive 5. So if I rewrite that on my scratch paper, it's going to be negative 5, right? And then I see my plus minus sign, plus minus. My square root sign, B squared. B, again, is a positive 5. So I'm going to go 5 squared. That's minus 4 next. Minus 4, that's times A and then times C. What number do I have for A again? 1. And I put my multiplication in parentheses, and I have my students do the same. Times A, which is 1, times C, which is 6. All of that divided by 2 times A. 2 times, what was A again? 1. So now if I can understand what variables and where to put them in the formula, I can plug this direct thing right into the calculator, and that's what I'm going to show you next. Let me get a moment for everyone to be able to write down how we plugged in the numbers into the formula. I have negative 5 plus minus 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 6 divided by 2 times 1. Okay. I'm going to pull up my calculator. You're going to have your calculator pulled up, and you can plug this in just like that. Now, if you notice, that quadratic formula is a fraction. So you're going to start with the fraction. I'm going to start, the fraction button is N over D, which is right here. It's in the same place in your handheld calculator. Boom, just like that. Every time I hit a button, it's going to turn red for you so you know where I am. And also let me clear out the side right here so you can see it. There we go. Now, a lot of times, other educators will ask me, how did I get the calculator on my computer? And I got to tell you, it's not cheap, my friends, but I went Texas Instrument, and thank you. I see you. I went to Texas Instrument, their website, and you can download it, but it will cost about $80. So I'm first going to put in what I had. I had my negative 5. Remember, your negative sign is down here. Don't use the subtraction sign. Here it is. So I have negative 5. Now, with quadratic equations, you're going to have 2 numbers for x. You're going to have your plus version and your minus version of x. First, we're going to put in the plus. All right. So remember, here we have our plus and our minus version. See that? Plus, minus. The first thing we're going to do is put in with the plus. So we're going to do that. Ooh, thank you, John. As long as it's the TI-30xs is all good. John says Aztec has the same calculator you can demonstrate with if your program uses the Aztec software. I'm going to put in my square root. Second button, square root. What comes after that is 5 squared. 5 squared. Don't forget the next thing is a minus, not a negative. So I'm going to do minus 4. Yeah, thank you, Laura. And then minus 4. I'm always going to represent my multiplication in sets of parentheses. Times 1, close parentheses, times 6, close parentheses. To get to the denominator of your fraction, you have to hit the down button. There it is. And then I had 2 times 1, like this. 2 times 1. Before you hit the enter, you must hit over to the right. That's key. If you don't, you're going to get a syntax error. And then hit enter. And you see your first answer is a -2. Now, it does take practice in order to figure that out, right? It does take practice in order to figure it out and be able to do it quickly. But once students have that practice, imagine a time that they will save on their test, instead of having to learn the calculator on the day of the test. Great. Now, remember, we're going to have 2 answers. Our first answer is a -2. We see it there. And now we have to go back and get the subtraction version of our answer. So how are we going to go get the subtraction version of our answer? We don't have to rewrite everything in. If you go up twice, click up twice. Here it is, 1, 2, and then hit enter. You can scroll around to get to that plus sign and change it to subtraction. And then we hit enter again. My subtraction version of the answer is -3. So I have x equals -2 and -3. So that's what we have here for the answer. Let me go back to our sheet. For this one, x equals -2 and -3. Let me pause right there for a second to see if there are any questions, and we'll do another. Thank you, Graylin. If you happen to get a syntax error or some type of message error, usually when students get that, it's usually because they're confusing the negative sign with the subtraction sign. That'll do it. Or if they're sometimes if they do not put their negative numbers in parentheses, that will do it too. Let's go ahead and practice another. No, let's see. And remember, please remember at the end, I'll show you where you can contact me, or for the YouTube channel in which I give you tons and hours worth of practice. I saw you, Jesse. I see you. And then Megan, I see, yeah. I see your question about the quadratic equation of this type. Factoring might be easy if students understood that. Lots of students don't understand the factoring part too. In fact, I have a hack for factoring questions too, and that's what we're going to take a look at next. You can actually use the quadratic equation in the calculator to hack your answers to factoring questions. Let's do another one of these, and then I'll show you what I mean. Sometimes, especially on the test, lots of times we won't get questions that actually equal 0, and you have to force it to equal 0 instead. Taking a look at this one right here. Let's take a look at this. Again, making sure your students understand that that is a quadratic equation. It can be easily identified with your x squared number instead of a regular equation. However, before you can put it in your calculator to hack your answer, it has to equal 0 first. Here, the question equals a -8. And this was a question I stole right from one of the GED practice tests. I need to make it equal 0 first. So if I have a -8 on the other side of this equal sign, how am I going to make it equal 0? By doing the opposite of what we see, just like we do when we solve regular equations. If I add 8, inverse operation, right? That equals 0. -8 plus 8, 0. Remember, what you do one side of the equation, you have to do to the other, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and bring everything down. X squared plus 13x. Do the math. 32 plus 80, that's going to give me 40. Positive 40. Here, sorry about the sloppy handwriting. There we go. So now I have a quadratic equation in which I can put right into the calculator. So again, telling your students, before you use the calculator to hack your answers to get the two, what the x equals for the negative and a positive version, tell them, make sure that they want to know that they have to have it equal 0 first by doing inverse operation. Now we can see, my friends, now we can see that this is going to be your A number, which is still an invisible 1. My B number is a 13, and my C number is a 40. So we're going to go back. We're going to go back and plug in for the equation. Remember, the equation starts with -b. My B number is a positive 13. So my equation, excuse me, my formula right up here, the formula, -b would be -13. I'm going to do my plus minus, square root. Inside my square root, I have b squared. Regular b is a positive 13, so put that. And then it says -4 times a, parentheses, times c, which was 40. All that divided by 2 times a, which is 1. One more practice of putting that in the calculator. Let me write that down so I can pull up my calculator. Hopefully you're with me. -13 plus minus square root of 13 squared minus 4 times 1 times 40 divided by 2 times 1. Placing it in one more time. And we're going to hit our clear button. And sometimes with the calculator, it will tend to hold numbers into it. So you want to be able to clear your memory completely. If your students are getting the wrong answer multiple times, tell them to press on the on button and the clear button at the same time for a few seconds until they get a message that says memory clear. Again, we're going to start with our fraction. Here we go. And then it said negative. Remember, your negative sign is down here. -5. I'm going to do the plus version first. Plus square root. It's the green button. It's like the shift button on a computer. Square root. 13 squared. 1. 3. Squared. Minus 4. Times 1. Close parentheses. Times 40. Close parentheses. Go down. 2 times 1. Close parentheses. Don't forget to hit all the way towards the right and enter. Your first answer for X is a -1. Whitney, for time, Whitney, you have a good question, Whitney. And as a teacher, I would actually prefer students to do the handwritten version of factoring when it comes to quadratic equations. But we got to remember, this is a timed test. So if they can do it with the calculator and the calculator is right in front of you, do it with the calculator. Save the time. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, Whitney, I like to do quadratic equations for hand, like, by hand, like for breakfast. Because I just like numbers like that. But I do understand the stress level and the time factor of my students. And so I tell them, if you can put it in a calculator and you're on a calculator part of the test, use the calculator, even for simple things like integer rules, so you have a less chance of making mistakes. Now, as teachers, I know all of us are thinking, man, we really want to know them to have it done by hand. They have to understand these skills. Yes, they do. But you got to remember, GED is a time test. It's a time test. You can teach it by hand in the class, but please make sure you teach them everything by the calculator too, because you'll have so much more point gains when it comes to GED if they understand how much they can do with the calculator. Remember, it's only the first 5 questions that are without the calculator. Yeah, there you go. Let me go back up here and see what I get for the second answer. Up twice. Hit enter. Let me scroll back. You're welcome, Joseph. Thank you. Change it to minus. Two answers there. Oh, I put my equation in wrong. Hold on. I'm gonna do that one more time with the correct numbers. The plus version, here we go. Yeah, I see you. It was -13. I had put -5. Plus. Yeah, thank you, Wayne. I just saw it. Plus square root 13 square. Minus 4 times 1 times 40 and 2 times 1 over, there it is, -5. That looks a lot better. The first time I had done it, I had a -5 over here. Now, that's for the first X number is -5. Let me write that down right here. My first X number is -5. Go back so I can get the second X number up twice. You don't have to put it in the calculator all over again. Enter, up twice, enter, scroll. Make it subtraction. Hit enter again. Our X for the second answer is -8. So we have X equals -5 and -8. Now, with only, I can't believe it's only like 5 minutes left. I wish I had much more time with this, but I do want to show you the factoring hack. What we see a lot with our students also is that, oh, I know, John, exactly. Exactly. John says we constantly have to evaluate the time needed to teach something and how many problems like that are on the test. Exactly. I know. Right. Because you might typically you'll have at least one problem that's going to be a quadratic equation on the test. And of course, with the factoring questions, once my students understand about the quadratic equation and once they can put that in a calculator quickly, I help them to use it with factoring type questions. Right. And this is what I mean. Now, again, I'm all about factoring by hand, all about factoring by hand. But if you are on a time test, thank you, Craig. If you're on a time test, I show students how to factor using the quadratic equation formula to hack their answers. Let me show you what I mean by that. We have time to put one in here. I'm going to show you especially harder quadratic equations, factoring questions like this. When it comes to factoring questions, you know, what they're looking for is the answers to 2 set of parentheses. Hey, doesn't this also remind you of what we did with FOIL? You know, if you FOIL this, you would get this. It's the reverse operation. FOIL this, you're going to get this. So I tell my students, when you're looking at a factoring question, especially our students that don't know their math facts very well, guess what? This is completely going to go in handy. And I'm going to do a hard one. I'm going to start here. Watch this. So with this one, a factoring question, they're going to be, how do I know, Kelly? How do I know the difference between a factoring and a quadratic equation question? Easy. This is a factoring question because it is not an equation because I don't see equal something. That's how I tell them to point out the difference between the two. If it's a factoring question, let's say it doesn't actually give you the directions of factor, and they just say solve instead of factor, you can tell the difference between the quad because it doesn't equal anything or the factoring. Factoring, you're not going to have equal something. So I tell them when they see that, you can use, though, the quadratic formula in order to hack your answers. So when my students see this and they realize it's a factoring question, but they're not so great with their facts, it will take them a long time to list out the factoring of this, that, and the other. Use a quadratic equation as a hack. They're first going to set up their 2 parentheses because they know. for factoring answers is going to set like this. They're going to put their variable in here and here. They're going to use the quadratic formula as a hack, like this. Yep, you see this as A. Yep, you see this as B. Yep, you see this as C. So they're going to write out their formula because they're so used to that. I have negative B, and B is already negative, so that just changed to positive. 2 plus minus B squared, my regular B is a 2, squared minus 4 times A. A is a 3 now. C is a negative 5. Divide that by 2 times A, 2 times 3, and we can place this in. So again, I'm using the quadratic formula to hack factoring questions. Now I'm going to put this in my calculator just like we did regular quadratic questions, and except what I see in my calculator, I'm going to put the opposite as my answer. Let me show you what I mean. Oh yes, John, they're on the test. Yes, they're on the test in which you'll see you have to solve. Now that I filled in my A, B's, and C's, I'm going to put it in just as if I were solving a regular quadratic. I just wrote that down. Once this. Fraction. 2 plus square root. Negative 2 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 5 down 2 times 3, don't forget over, and enter. Look at that. My answer is a positive 5/3. So when these questions, if you're looking at a factoring question, your answer was a positive 5/3. And to hack it, make it factoring, do the opposite of what you saw. That was a positive 5/3. What's the opposite of positive 5/3? A negative 5/3. So this is what I'm going to fill in. I'm going to put my negative 5 here. If you get a denominator answer, that goes in front here. And this is how I show my students how to hack factoring. Put the opposite of what the calculator gives you when you're doing a factoring question. It was a positive 5/3. Negative 5/3. To get my subtraction answer, up twice, enter, scroll over, subtraction version, bam. I got a -1 for my answer here. So guess what I'm going to put in the other set of parentheses? The opposite of what I see, +1. Bam, you just factored in seconds. I know it's already 1:59. I wish you could stay with me for another good 2 hours because I would love to keep going and showing you some more, but I can't. But I will leave you with this. There is so much more I would like to show you guys, so I'm sorry about that because we could have gone into graphing and everything. An hour sure does go by quickly. But I will give you my contact information here. You're very welcome. Thank you, Graylin. Here you go. I do these hack videos on TikTok as well, in which your students are more than welcome to join YouTube as well, and also my YouTube channel, in which I do all these GED math hacking types of questions. Thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you, Kelly. You make learning
Oh,
fun.
yeah.
I'm jealous of your students.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And wait, as you exit to fill out the evaluation, thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great rest of the day.
Right? Bye, guys. Have a good rest of the day and tomorrow.